review in our monetary policy statement of April 2016. We said we would watch macroeconomic and financial developments in the months ahead with a view to responding as space opens up. Now, incoming data since then show a sharper than anticipated upsurge in inflationary pressures emanating from a number of food items, as well as a rise in commodity prices. Now, we expect that a strong monsoon, continued astute food management, as well as steady expansion in supply capacity, especially in services, could help offset these upward pressures. But given the uncertainties, the Reserve Bank will stay on hold. However, the stance of monetary policy remains accommodative, and we will monitor macroeconomic and financial developments for any further scope for policy action. We also noted that the transmission of policy into bank lending rates still remains work in progress. We will shortly review the operation of the marginal cost lending rate framework to iron out any issues. And we also believe that timely capital infusion into constrained public sector banks will also aid credit flows. Now, I want to talk about a few other concerns that have been left out of the policy statement. On liquidity, there have been two big concerns. First, on the maturing FCNR-B deposits. Our sense is that the leveraged portion of those deposits, people have borrowed to invest in FCNR-B deposits, that leveraged portion will not be renewed. Therefore, there could be outflows possibly of the order of $20 billion or so. Now, we have covered these outflows in the forward markets. And before the maturation of the deposits, we will take some advanced deliveries in the lead up to the maturity. Now, some counterparties that we have contracts with are apprehensive that they may not be able to deliver easily on the dollars we are owed, and hence there may be some episodes of dollar shortage in the market going forward. This is something we will monitor. We may supply dollars in case of extreme volatility, but no one should take this for granted. But for sure, we have plenty of dollars that we can supply if necessary. We are also committed to supply short-term rupee liquidity to the extent needed to support our monetary stance. The second concern on liquidity has been a question about how long we propose to take to move from a situation of systemic liquidity deficit to one of close to neutrality. Now, this is something that depends on the market and external conditions. As you know, we've already infused a fair amount of durable liquidity into the markets. In addition, we are seeing some reduction in outstanding cash balances. We will not commit to a time frame by which we will move to a neutral position, but we will be opportunistic in moving the system towards that goal. Finally, on the bank cleanup, we are working together with the government on facilitating the process. There are discussions going on mechanisms that will leave projects with the right capital structures as well as access to credit, with also some incentives for promoters to earn their way out of difficulty. SEBI is also being consulted on these issues. There's also some talk of a variety of funds to invest in stress situations. However, and let me emphasize this, there is no intent to go back to the days of forbearance or reverse the move towards transparent bank balance sheets. Let me stop there and we can take questions now.
Thank you, sir. Supriya.
Good afternoon, Governor. Good morning, Governor. The question that I want to ask you is a takeaway from the policy. It seems to me that you are being a little hawkish on inflation. So is that reading correct? Because a lot of what has been said in the policy as far as the April forecast is concerned, you've said there's an upside bias to it now. You've said there's inflationary pressure emanating from food and commodity prices. The question that one would want to ask you at this stage is there a probability of the 5% target being revised upwards? That's point number one. And point number two, a lot of the heavy lifting is expected to be done by the monsoon. So are we expecting a pause in the August and the October policy as well? That's one part of the question. And the second part of the question is commodity. Okay. One second. The commodity prices that you spoke about, how has that changed the dynamics of both monetary and fiscal policy? And if you give me the liberty of asking you a third question, there's too much noise
later,
about...
Later.
All right.
Look, that's a lot of, those are a lot of questions. Look, all we are saying is that relative to our April stance, the data that came in surprised on the upside. I don't think there's any news about that. The inflation reading in April was higher than anybody in the markets or we expected. Now, going forward, we have to see how it pans out. It is 1 month's readings. We have to see how, as you said, the monsoon plays out, how that affects food prices. We have to look at supply management by the government. So a variety of factors will come into play. And I wouldn't term, I hate these bird analogies, hawkish, dovish, etc. I would just say it's a realistic assessment of the data that have come in. There are potential disinflationary pressures. There are also potential inflationary pressures. The net effect is we've put a little more weight on upside risk to inflation, but we have to wait and see. The target is obviously 5% by March 2017. That target is there for us to attain, and we have to figure out how to attain it.
Have disinflationary pressures gone down?
I wouldn't say that. I mean, there are, again, the monsoon could be a source of disinflationary pressure. If some salient prices come down rapidly, that could also bring down expectations. Expectations are moving about a little bit. So we have to see.
Shobna? Shobna from Financial Express. So you said transmission is work in progress. So could you give us some sense of how much more you're expecting now that the marginal cost of funding rate is in place?
Well, it's early days yet. I mean, this has been in place for about a month. We have to see how it transmits into lending rates. There's a MCLR, and then the banks have to add a spread to it. And we have to see how that moves. So I think it's going to take a little while before we can assess fully whether it has the effect intended. So,
Lata?
Lata Venkatesh from CNBC TV 18. Governor, you said you began the statement how long we take to neutrality. If you can flesh out that statement a little more. In July, because of the redemptions, we may anyway reach neutrality. Will you continue with OMOs to make up for the backlog of deficit? So do we reach neutrality early? And more importantly, the market's terribly worried about passing on rates or even yields because of the coming FCNRB deposits that will leg it out in September, October. The bigger worry is about rupee liquidity. You will give the dollars to the banks, but then you will suck out rupee liquidity. So if you can detail the game plan of the Reserve Bank so that the market's worries are lessened. And pardon me, this is not to embarrass you at all, but if you can tell us anything about whether you will be there during those tense months, September and October, have you been offered and have you refused?
okay.
There is a lot of uncertainty in the markets and they want to know will we open to a second term of this offer?
So let me take questions one at a time. You asked about liquidity. I said something about liquidity, I think, when you were outside the room. So we will monitor both dollar and rupee liquidity and act appropriately. I think as far as our ability to act, there should be no question. At the same time, we don't want to encourage complacency on the part of people who've sold us dollars, assuming we will come in when they can't provide the dollars to us and bail them out. That's not the intent at all.
Rupee liquidity.
Rupee liquidity, we will always provide what the market requires. That we're committed to. Okay? Now, as far as this separation between long-term liquidity and short-term liquidity goes, and the idea to move long-term liquidity to a neutral position, that will take some time. I think We may find periods when the market is not borrowing from us. But that doesn't necessarily mean the long-term liquidity is in balance at that point, because it could be a period of surplus. So we will have to achieve that over a period of time. It's something that we will work on. I can't give you a date by which we will achieve that. I've said we will be opportunistic in getting there.
Like, is it 2016? Is it FY17?
Look,
is it first half of 2016?
Last time this question was asked, I said, here's a way we could do it in 8 months. But I don't know. It depends on how market conditions evolve. So let's see. Oh, okay.
So you have the choice of answering that question at the end.
Yeah,
of the
you know, I have a prepared statement on that. As far as the question of my continuing in this position after September 4th goes, it would be cruel of me to spoil the fun the press is having with all its speculation. I am personally intrigued by all the letters I'm supposed to have written. Seriously, in all such cases, a decision is reached after discussion between the government and the incumbent. I'm sure you will know when there is news. I cannot do better than point you to the statements of the Finance Minister and the Prime Minister on this. That's all I have to say.
Okay, next question from Aparna.
Sir, Aparna from Mint. My first question is on the stressed asset
We
resolution.
go one
that you-
question by one question.
Okay, so this will be my first question.
Somebody set a pattern for multiple questions.
Yes.
Supriya.
Yes.
So my question is on stressed asset resolution that the RBI is working with the government. So in the previous, when the stressed asset was discussed, you had reservations of a bad bank kind of structure. Is the stressed asset fund which is proposed by the government different from the bad bank? Are you okay with what the government is proposing? And are there any contours, or would you like to share some more details on how this would come about?
No, in any, there are a variety of stressed asset funds one could think of. For example, one would be a lending fund. That's not going to take assets off the banks. It's going to lend into stress situations. So take a project which has already got loans from the banks, but which needs more funding. You could lend into that, right? And then there are situations where you want to buy the asset. That looks more like a bad bank. And there the key question is at what price? I think there are lots of ideas floating around as to how price will be determined, as well as how the banks may feel confident in selling at that price. We have to see if, in fact, it works out.
You had issues.
The issue is not for me to be comfortable. The issue is for banks to be comfortable in selling at that price, and for the stressed asset fund to pay a price which it thinks is appropriate. That meeting of the two is a big issue which needs to be resolved, right? Banks want to sell at a price which typically ARCs don't want to buy at. Now, how do we bridge that gap is something we have to wait and see.
Pradeep?
दो स्टेटमेंट जो आपने अभी दिए उससे मुझे लगता है रुपए पे काफ़ी प्रेशर ऑलरेडी होगा, हालांकि हम लोग यहाँ हैं तो मुझे पता नहीं. एक आपने कहा कि सम काउंटर पार्टीज में नॉट बी एबल टू सप्लाई डॉलर्स. इससे आपका क्या?
There is an apprehension that some counterparties have expressed that others may not be able to supply dollars, or they may not find that they can raise dollars in time.
तो इसका मतलब यह है कि डॉलर के लिए उस समय शायद डिमांड काफ़ी ज़्यादा बढ़ जाएगी और एक रुपये पे प्रेशर हो सकता है. दूसरी बात आपने ये कहा कि वी विल प्रोवाइड डॉलर बट इट शुड नॉट बी टेकन फॉर ग्रांटेड. तो अगेन आप, मुझे लगता है कि रुपये में एक डिप्रिसिएशन का दरअसल आउटलुक या संकेत दे रहे हैं.
नहीं, we have no desire to move the rupee in any direction. At the same time, if people have contracted to supply us dollars, all we are saying is they shouldn't rely on us bailing them out and us supplying them the dollars that they're going to supply us, right? So they should be a little careful. They should perhaps take, enter into appropriate contracts.
तो आप मार्केट पार्टिसिपेंट्स को हेजिंग के लिए एक सिग्नल दे रहे हैं, आपका मैसेज क्या है?
No, all I'm saying is that maybe Khan Saab has a better way of saying this than I have. आप ये लीजिए।
जैसा गवर्नर साहब ने अभी बताया आपको, हम पूरा प्रतिबद्ध हैं कि रुपया का लिक्विडिटी और डॉलर लिक्विडिटी को जिस तरह से संभाला जाएगा मार्केट को, उसके लिए हम प्रतिबद्ध हैं। और मार्केट में जो वॉलेटिलिटी हुआ उसको कंटेन करने के लिए हम प्रतिबद्ध हैं। तो उसमें हम लोग ने जैसा कई प्रेस में और मीडिया में इसके बारे में काफ़ी चर्चा हो रही है। थोड़े बैंक के कुछ ना कुछ प्रॉब्लम आ सकते हैं जो गवर्नर साहब ने कहा, लेकिन सिस्टम वाइड हम अभी तक जो हमारा जो अनुमान है, सिस्टम वाइड इसका कोई ज़्यादा असर गिरने वाला नहीं है, क्योंकि हमारा फॉरवर्ड मैच है और जो छोटा मोटा प्रॉब्लम जहाँ होगा हमारे पास इतना साधन है, वो छोटा मोटा प्रॉब्लम को हम सॉल्व कर सकते हैं।